Hi, we're back, and Veronica's back with us. Robert is back with us, and we are also joined by Andrew Rakich, the director of the Sudbury Devil. Veronika is the producer, of course, and worked on it. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Greg. Hey, Robert. What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Um, and so we're going to talk about the Sudbury Devil, um, which I did get a chance to see. It before I even we start talking about it. What's the availability of the movie to the general public at this moment?
At this moment, it is undergoing an independently organized roadshow in three countries, the US, UK, and Australia. We've been on, I think, something like 25 screens so far, and hopefully more to come. However, sort of the big news and kind of probably the most relevant thing to anyone listening is that on December 21st, the winter solstice, we are doing a self-distributed distributed streaming release, not physical, streaming release, basically through my website, atunshavefilms.com. And, we can have all relevant links in the description of this podcast, or you can head over to my YouTube channel, atunshavefilms.com, or just search the Sudbury Devil, and the link will absolutely come up. But
Okay.
yeah, December 21st, it'll be available worldwide.
Just in time for Christmas.
And where is it?
Indeed.
Where is it playing next on screen?
That's a great question. I don't think we have any screenings lined up in the short term, but I know that Stray Cat it wants to screen it again, and a couple of other theaters expressed interest as well. So we're just kind of waiting to hear on them. So hopefully we'll continue to be able to have kind of one night only or limited run screenings in all sorts of cool, funky theaters, all over the world.
Stray Cat is in Kansas City.
Kansas
Yes,
City.
that's right. Yeah.
Kansas City, Kansas, or Kansas City,
Missouri, on the Missouri side. So.
Okay.
Yes, Missouri.
So, the Sudbury Devil is a folk horror. I think we can safely say it is set in the 1700s, 1700s, right?
1600s.
So early Puritans encountering the devil and various glowing lights, and their own sort of conflicted history of bloodshed, I think. Is there any other way you as director would like to describe or pitch the movie to people to try to get them interested in it? What's the twist on it?
Well, basically, it's about these two witch hunters that go to a small Massachusetts town of Sudbury, which is incorporated the town of Wayland, modern day town of Wayland, Massachusetts, which is where I grew up. It's always been a creepy town, Puritan times and modern times, no exception. And basically, these two witch hunters have heard that this guy saw some really freaky stuff in the woods, and they force this guy to lead them to the site of where he saw said freaky stuff, and it all kind of goes downhill from there. It is a film that is very concerned with the foundational rot of America, and it's essentially about this conflict between the quote unquote godly sort of Western civilization that is beginning to colonize the North American continent at this time, and as the Puritans conceived of it, sort of the demonic, satanic wilderness, and all of the superstition and the paganism and the witchcraft and the femininity and the sexuality that goes along with that in term mythologically and otherwise. This film is the sort of primary event of this film is a conflict called King Philip's War. Our film is set in 1678, 2 years after this conflict ended. A little known but shockingly brutal and also vital American conflict between the United Colonies of New England and three Native American nations of that region, which basically, I mean, it was only lasted 18 months, in southern New England, but it led to a shocking number of civilian deaths. It's the bloodiest war per capita in American history, and ended with the genocide of those Native American nations. So not exactly the happy-go-lucky story of the first Thanksgiving, right? There's kind of a bit of a reason why we as a country in our kind of self-congratulatory nationalist mythology don't like to remember these events, because they're just deeply unflattering to everybody involved, not kid-friendly whatsoever. And so a big part of this film is essentially these Puritan men who are veterans of King Philip's War. Everybody is touched by it in some way. Every character is crippled, from some war wound in some manner. And it's all about these. We use sort of the allegorical conceits of folk horror to kind of expose this truth about early American history, and in putting our characters in these wonderfully bizarre, violent, and depraved situations, we kind of strip away their artifice and reveal the brutality, the hypocrisy, the authoritarianism, and just the frail, whimpering humanity beneath.
Oh, excellent pitch. Excellent pitch. I did, before I turn the questioning over to Robert, that leads to a lot of follow-up questions, but there's something that caught my eye that I wanted to ask about or have you mention, and that is, can you tell us where the film premiered and why or how that came about?
Sure. So our film premiered at the Satanic Temple World Headquarters in Salem, Massachusetts. Basically, I have a friend who is a minister of Satan, and I had filmed there once before in the headquarters for my YouTube channel. And when it came around to deciding where we were going to premiere this film, we could think of no finer place. The Satanic Temple is of course, highly. Not only is it just aesthetically the perfect venue for our premiere, but I think spiritually, ideologically as well, because a big thing of what the Satanic Temple in particular does is kind of stand up against this sort of heterodox, Christian sort of theocracy and Christian conservatism. So it seemed like kind of the perfect place. And what a raucous premiere. It was a great 2-night premiere that we were at in Salem. Whole cast and crew turned out. It was thrilling. It was awesome.
Okay. All right. Hey, so Robert, do you have some questions prepared or just off the top of your head that you can ask?
Oh, a little bit. I think, as I told Veronika after the screening at Stray Cat, I had I'd heard the title of the film, but went in not knowing anything aside that it was folk horror. And I think afterwards I told Veronika it's sort of like the hell. I guess it'd be like the hellspawn of a field in England, and Ravenous after just a really raucous night together. And it goes further than either, and it actually goes further than either of those films. It's very layered, and I just have to say I was just like really impressed, especially for so we're doing low budget folk horror film. You didn't fall into any of the traps that you would that one would expect. Yeah, I guess in terms of the questions, like I went through your YouTube channel, which I recommend anyone who sees a film and is a fan, they should check it out to see some of your other work. And I did I guess on one of the pieces that you did on some of the historical basis, so getting more of an understanding of what was in the film. I guess mine is, before I get to initial questions about the film, there was one question I meant to ask Veronika and just put it off because I wanted to investigate all on my own. But at the end, you have an executive producer credit by one Tabitha King, and I was just thinking, could it be that Tabitha King? And I guess it is the esteemed writer and wife of Stephen King. How did she, I guess, uh, become executive producer, lending her name to the film?
Do you want me to field that, Veronica?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, Tabitha is an excellent genealogist, and one of her big interests is the 17th century New England. And she found me through my YouTube channel, and during our crowdfunding campaign, even though she found me a little bit after. Our crowdfunding campaign, we had a perk basically that was, if you donate a certain amount of money to the budget, you get a producer credit, and Tabitha, out of just, I guess, being a fan of mine, and sort of wanting to see kind of what sort of movie I would make, I was incredibly generous, and footed some of our budget for us, yeah, so we have some other wonderful sort of people too, who also sort of were bigger donors, like Alexander Rosenblum, who's also listed as a co-producer. So yeah. So we were very fortunate. I mean, Tabitha really sort of, we ate well because of Tabitha, and I was able to hire drivers and didn't have to drive to Logan Airport at 3 o'clock in the morning to pick people up because of Tabitha. So we love her. She's great. Patroness of all things 17th century New England. And yeah, she's awesome.
Okay. I remember seeing that on the screen, and I was just thinking, could it be that Tabitha King? And just said, wonderful. As to the other, having seen some of your other work on the YouTube channel, Sudbury Devil, I guess the evolution of it, because most of the other work is, I guess, more lighter, or more comedy oriented. So there's more comedy in it. There's comedy in Sudbury Devil, but it's more like very dark humor. This really succeeds as a dramatic piece, as a horror film. Did you find like in terms of making that jump from some of your earlier work into doing this, like I guess in terms of like stretching yourself?
No, honestly, I've always been interested in horror. A lot of my other films, like my shorts and stuff, and and student films and stuff, were horror films. And I didn't really find it to be very much of a jump at all, because I do think that horror and comedy are very sort of closely linked and very closely related. I think horror is comedy's sort of evil twin sister, because both are sort of concerned with wrenching an emotional reaction, an involuntary emotional reaction out of an audience. It's very concerned with affect. So I think, and so yeah, I think they're sort of they're sort of logical bedfellows. So I think that horror and comedy can, are sort of pretty interchangeable. If you're good at one, you're probably going to be good at the other. And also I think in terms of kind of the message of our film, in terms of the allegory, I think horror operates a lot like satire in that way, where you can kind of indirectly speak a harsh truth. You know what I mean? You can play in the margins. You can say the unspoken thing in horror and in comedy and satire that in a more sort of straightforward dramatic piece, and especially in something like a nonfiction piece, it would come across as very preachy, very corny. but by kind of showing instead of telling through horror or satire, and they're both just uniquely equipped, I think, to do that. You can kind of plant a very strong idea into an audience's brain. So yeah, no, I didn't find that difficult at all.
Okay. Yeah, like I said, it's very layered because you deal with well, there's a lot of things. There's the no that in terms of like the founding in the country and dealing with the native population. You have religion. You have religion and hypocrisy. You also race, dealing with race, and also with the role of women. There's so much that's going on, and for like most, in terms of like and I would say and sect. Although with like some of the folk horror that I've seen that gets classed with folk horror, when it's touched on, it's not really touched on deeply. The only things I can think of is like, things like Blood on Satan's Claw, where it's sort of oblique, and Ravenous, where you have the homoeroticism as a part of it. Sudbury, it's kind of you handle it very well. It's very upfront. I don't know if this is giving it anything away to people who haven't seen it, but the double penetration at the end,
Yeah.
figuratively and literally, it was just kind of, but I don't know, in terms of like
it's delightful. It's just lovely.
when you conceive, like in terms of like when you conceive this, like how long, I guess how long was the production in terms of conceiving the project, and how you're gonna just approach so much, like so I know I'm assuming that you were in probably like several years in terms of like getting when things kind of like coalesced and gelled together.
Well, before I answer that, I mean, honestly, as our resident film scholar, Veronika, do you want to talk about kind of the folk horror elements and Blood on Satan's Claw and some of the influences from Ravenous and stuff?
Yeah, well, definitely. Blood on Satan's Claw also, they screened the trailer of it before at Stray Cat Film Center, and the Hammer film The Witches, which is like maybe my favorite Hammer film, which is a classic Veronika hot take. But I'm amongst people who love Wild Blue Yonder by Werner Herzog, so I'm safe. But I will say I met Andy whenever he sat behind me in Leanna Lawrence's class, Foundations of Western Thought, and he was the only other person on the planet Earth that I'd heard utter the words ravenous out loud in a context of the movie. And so, yeah, we became great, fast friends from there. But yeah, whenever I was approached to do it, I was really hungry for folk horror. But yeah, I do feel like you touching on stuff like Blood and Satan's Claw and Ravenous, it really does get to just the absolute most grunty meat and potatoes kind of like exactly what I want in it. So yeah, I don't know.
I'm sorry. The only other film I can think of that deals specifically with the Americas in that is probably Eyes of Fire.
Yeah, Eyes of Fire is great.
Finally put it last year.
Yes.
Everything else is pretty much like is like British and such. So this,
Europe, especially Britain.
Okay.
Yeah, and it is that. Yeah, and we definitely really wanted to plant our American flag. Down our version of whatever screwed up flag that our company would have. The Sudbury flag. Yeah. And I guess our flag is a rock. That's instead. So.
Eyes of Fire is a great movie. It's the special effects are just, even for 1982, are just absolutely awful. But it does kind of add to the charm a little bit. But no, that is a great movie, and it does. You're right. It does sort of deal with that. And I think the unique thing about American folk horror is, especially and specifically in terms of the colonial era and in terms of westward expansion, and Ravenous kind of touches on this a little bit as well. But and this is highly relevant to Puritan cosmology and demonology is this again, like I kind of said in the pitch, it's this conflict between settlement and wilderness, right? Between farm and forest, between light and darkness, between God and the devil. The you know, and here's where I'll sort of fly my my ELF ALF freak flag a little bit, but in the days of westward expansion and in the days of Manifest Destiny, the colonists rarely appreciated the natural beauty of their environment, even though pre-industrial North America must have been absolutely staggeringly beautiful. Instead, they fixated on its resource potential. They wanted to cordon everything off. They wanted to fence everything off. They brought animal farming to this continent, creating very strict hierarchies in that way. The farmer is kind of the lord of the manor. His animals are his serfs. His wife and children are his stewards. So there's this very ordered, very property based, very sort of meticulously laid out in terms of land management and cordoned off in terms of ownership sort of view of nature and this sort of trampling over of nature. Of course, but what they didn't realize at the time was that Native Americans also had very intricate forms of land management. They were just unrecognizable to European eyes. But from the European perspective, Native Americans were these primitive Stone Age people who lived at one with nature, and while certainly sort of 20th and 21st century liberal sort of perspectives might view that as like a good thing, even though that's itself ahistorical. Of course, back in the 17th and 18th century, that was something sort of deeply evil. You know what I mean? It was something deeply perverse to be sort of that aboriginal. And so I think Eyes of Fire really touches on it because it's they go into this valley and it's this sort of untamed, unreached valley that no European has ever seen. Of course, they have sort of weird, freaky, naked demon people and wood witches and stuff. But that is kind of how Europeans at the time viewed indigenous people of the Eastern Woodlands. So it's even though it is itself this sort of horror movie nonsense, it's very much based on a real psychological sort of state of mind, I guess. And and Sudbury is also very, very concerned with that. I mean, we are, the native presence in the film is almost this sort of ghostly presence. And even though it isn't strictly historically accurate that every Native American in New England was completely wiped out, we kind of wanted to suggest that almost, right? We wanted our characters to enter this kind of newly depopulated forest that is kind of just a ghost town. It's sort of this graveyard, and it's empty. There's nobody there except for this sort of, Josiah Cutting, played by Josh Hope in the film, says, the savages are gone, the devil remains. And that's very much something that the characters are contending with in sort of this, they've just depopulated these forests and this wilderness, and now they need to colonize it. But, in our story, of course, and I think in all good American folk horror of this period, the wilderness strikes back. The wilderness is not going to go down without a fight. And in those sort of margins, like you were saying, Robert, we can deal with sort of formational ideas about race and gender in American life and sexuality, and that kind of within that milieu of we're sort of able to sort of formulate almost this creation myth, this sort of dark creation myth about America. So that's definitely what we were trying to do.
And touching a little bit more on Eyes of Fire, and kind of relating it to our movie and to Blackula, which we spoke about the Blu-ray release a little bit before you were on, Andy, is that we talked about the power of putting Shakespearean trained actors into low budget movies. And I think what would set our movie apart, or what would continue the legacy of Eyes of Fire in a positive direction, would be casting conservatory and Shakespearean trained actors in our movie. And then speaking to the sort of dramatic elements, of the film and how it works so well, I think, is largely in part, due to all of the incredibly well-trained actors. Yeah.
All the actor performances were impressive, and I guess I should mention this because in terms of period, this is in terms of the dialogue. You actually it was written in sort of like period appropriate, so that everyone is sort of speaking the cadence and vocabulary of the time. And in most historical films, they may make an attempt at it, but then they just sort of like give it up. And everyone did very well with this. And especially, and it kind of like, I guess in my mind, where it's low budget and you start low budget, you look at historical stuff and you start kind of like trying to pick it apart. But then as it progressed, it's sort of like you don't really care that much. It was sort of like, I believe that they were actually a part of the period, which like on much larger budgeted films, you don't even kind of get that far into buying that belief. And especially Kendra Unique's performance, which is pretty brave.
Yeah,
in areas, because in terms of like how it's set up with Cutting's reaction to like the native population and such, that doesn't really believe that they are human. And her character, at first you meet her, sort of plays into that at first, until sort of like as these go along, you reveal that there's more. I get that there's more intent behind it. Like I say, it was an amazing performance, and I think, as Veronika had mentioned, somebody had asked if there's any time when people walked out of the theater, and I believe that she mentioned that was kind of like the point where some couldn't take it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. Well, to your first point about the dialect and the accent, yeah, you're right. There's very few films that really kind of nail the early modern English language. Most don't attempt to, because in order to be commercial, I mean, a lot of it is indecipherable. So, in terms of commercial potential, I could see, sort of, if I put my producer cap on, how somebody, it's just like, let's not do that. But at the same time, yeah, a lot, there is also, but we have seen and heard this language before in Shakespeare films. Certainly, there are, even in something like Shakespeare in Love, which is kind of more modern, but definitely sort of, Tom Stoppard, who wrote that, even though a conscious effort was made to make it accessible, like there's all sorts of period accurate dialogue just sort of peppered in there. Within our genre, the Robert Eggers' The Witch really nailed the dialogue as well. A lot of that, as I understand, was taken right from literature of the time, as was a lot of ours. But our film is the first film ever made to feature a period correct accent. So the accent that we use in this film is called original pronunciation. It was reconstructed by a linguist and a Shakespeare scholar to basically approximate, it's probably not exact, but it's a good approximation, probably the best guess we have currently, as far as how, Shakespeare sounded, how King James I sounded, how basically the accent in Southern England in the early 17th century. Now, that isn't precisely our time, we're 1678, but there was a bit of a fad a few years ago of having Shakespeare plays performed in this accent. So the good news is there's a lot of resources out there for actors. So basically, and one of our dialogue coaches, Emma Coulter, was pretty proficient in it as well. So that really was kind of a no-brainer. I thought, like, wow, wouldn't that be amazing to not only have period appropriate dialogue, but an accent to go along with that is accurate. And actually, speaking of Kendra's performance as well, that was sort of the bit of artistic license that we took, because unfortunately, but also, predictably, Europeans, English people at the time, left us a lot of clues as to how they spoke, but their slaves they didn't really care about. They didn't leave behind much information about them at all. So basically, as far as Kendra's accent went, that was a kind of a big question mark. And so Kendra and Emma Coulter, our dialect coach, basically pieced Frankenstein and accent together from Barbadian, Jamaican, and original pronunciation, and also Congolese sort of sounds, and sort of Frankenstein it together, and I think it works beautifully. But yeah, her performance is incredible, and Flora is just so extra. I love her; she's great.
Okay, I'm not sure how much time we have left. I did want to mention this because, especially after watching the film, I went to the page to see some of your other work, and went through the other thing that you're mainly known for, Checkmate Lincolnites, which I have to say, when I was pretty impressed. I didn't in terms of in terms of presenting the historical fact and being entertaining as well. I think it was really pulled off well, and sort of like this, where also in Sudbury Devil, where you can make sort of parallels to certain things going on in the country. I was in Lincoln Nights when there's a certain parallel made, I think, with other works, which was kind of like, at first, where did Nazis come in? But it's completely consistent in terms of history and kind of like where we're heading now. And again, it's like most of the earlier work, like I say, it's comedy, but it's not. But it's, what's the word? It's comedy. It's but it's not frivolous. But it's not frivolous, I think is the term I'm looking for. Sudbury Devil, again, is straight horror, but again, it's not frivolous as well. I hope that it's going to find a larger audience for you.
Oh, thanks, Robert. That's very kind. Thanks.
Okay. God, the only other thing is in terms of also with the historical thing, the Witchfinder General series that that you do, which also plays into this, and some of the history on King Philip, which I'm guessing some of the research that went into this.
Yeah, totally.
So, I don't have a question.
That's fine.
In terms of which one, yeah, do you have a question, Greg? Something to add, Greg?
Not really a question, but it's something to add, and maybe it's a little bit of a question. We are running low on time, but it seems to me that if you go to the, we'll link it, but is it pronounced Atonche?
Atunche, yeah.
The YouTube page, you will find a lot of little historical documentary type little films that are going to give you some background, play into the Sudbury Devil, inform it, and make it a richer experience. Would you say that's correct, Andrew?
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. And just so we are running out of time, but I was curious, there's so much history. Are you a historian by background who went into filmmaking, or is history a hobby sideline?
Yeah, no, other way around. I'm a filmmaker by trade, and I consider by profession. I think I'm not a historian. I would never claim to be a historian. But I'm a documentarian, right? But who's kind of reasonably good at research and can kind of tell a good source from a bad one, I guess. And I always I cite my work. You know what I mean? I'm very upfront about the fact that I'm a filmmaker and a documentarian and an entertainer. So I basically lean on I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, on the academics and the experts, who have been studying this stuff for their entire lives, and I cite their work extensively, down to the page number. I don't expect anybody to believe me. They can check my sources and come to their own conclusion about whether I've done a good job kind of presenting the narrative of the history that I'm telling.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we do have, speaking of, we spoke about frivolous, we do have a frivolous final question that we always ask. We've already asked Veronika, so we're going to ask you. And that question that we try to end every interview with a new interviewee is, what is your hometown, which I think we know, and more importantly, can you recommend a restaurant there?
Yeah, Wayland, Massachusetts, and no.
There's no seafood. It's you must be inland.
Yeah, no, I don't. I don't eat meat, so
Oh.
But there's yeah, I mean, there's good places in yeah, I mean, Boston does have some good food for sure. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I live in New Orleans now, so it's like, so I have very high standards for food these days. If it's not like excellent and mouthwatering, then I just yeah. I'm a snob about food now. Ever since I moved to South Louisiana.
It's okay, Natalie and I'll cook for you.
I have one quick
Go ahead.
off-topic question. Well, take the chance. Since you're a historian, what was your opinion of the film Revolution that Hugh Hudson?
I haven't seen that in ages, so I don't even really remember it. I remember enjoying it for the most part, but a lot of inaccuracies too. But not that's that's like a be all end all. But I do remember there are quite a few inaccuracies.
And okay, well, we have 30 seconds for an outro. So thank you, Andrew Rakich. Thank you, Veronika Payton.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
And Sudbury Devil will be December 21st. Look for
it. It'll be streaming worldwide.
We'll link
on autuneshavefilms.com.
We'll link to everything for you. So thanks so much for coming on. Great success with the film, and see you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, great talking to you guys.
Take care.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure.